Admiral Jack Morrison stood at the observation deck of the human ship Terra's Voice, watching the massive Galactic Council station spin slowly in space. The station was huge, bigger than Earth's moon, and home to representatives from 847 different alien species. Jack had been coming here for 15 years, and every time he saw it, he felt smaller. Today was different, though. Today, Jack felt angry. The council chamber buzzed with the sounds of hundreds of different alien languages. Translators worked overtime to make sense of the chaos. Jack sat in the human section, which was near the back of the room. Humans always sat in the back. That was how things worked in the Galactic Council. The older your species, the closer. You sat to the front. At the very front sat the Valkyrians. They looked like giant purple lizards with too many arms. They had been part of the council for over 3,000 years. Next to them were the crystalline beings who looked like living diamonds. Behind them were the psionics, creatures made of pure energy who could read minds. All of them looked down on humans, Captain. Lisa Grant sat in the defendant's chair in the center of the chamber. She was a cargo ship pilot who had been caught selling Earth coffee to the Zephyrian colonies. The Zephyrians were a poor species who lived on the edge of the galaxy. They had joined the council only 50 years before humans did. The Valkyrian. Prosecutor Zixthok stood up on his 4 legs and pointed at Lisa with 2 of his 6 arms. His voice boomed through the chamber. "This human has broken the Trade Monopoly Act," Zixthok said. "She sold goods directly to a lesser species without going through proper council channels. This is illegal." Clenched his fists. The Trade Monopoly Act meant that all trade had to go through the council's approved companies. These companies were owned by the older species. They charged huge fees and often refused to trade with poorer species at all. Lisa's lawyer, a human named Pete Jackson, stood up. Captain Grant was providing coffee to colonies that were starving. The council's approved traders wanted to charge 10 times the fair price. Zixthok laughed, a sound like metal scraping on stone. Fair price? Humans do not understand economics. The council sets prices to maintain order. If every species could trade freely, there would be chaos. What chaos? Pete asked. Captain Grant's coffee helped feed hungry families. The chaos of inferior species thinking they have rights, Zixthok replied. Jack felt his anger growing. He had heard this kind of talk for years. Humans were always called inferior. They were too young, too emotional, too unpredictable. The older species treated them like children who needed to be controlled. The trial continued for hours. Witness. After witness from the Zephyrian colonies testified that Lisa's coffee had saved lives. Children had been dying from hunger. The council's approved food was too expensive and often spoiled during the long journey. None of it mattered. Counselor. Prime Valtharian, the leader of the Valkyrians, barely looked up from his datapad. When he finally spoke, his voice was bored. The defendant is guilty. She will serve 5 years in a council prison. Her ship will be destroyed. The human government will pay a fine of 1 million credits. The chamber erupted in noise. The Zephyrian representatives cried out in their high-pitched voices. Even some of the other younger species looked shocked. Jack stood up. Counselor Prime, I request to speak. Valtharian sighed. Very well, the human may speak. Jack walked to the center of the chamber. Around him, hundreds of alien eyes watched. He had prepared a speech about justice and fairness. Instead, he found himself thinking about something else. 3 years ago, Jack began, the psionic dominion began killing the fringe dwellers in the outer rim. We brought evidence to this council. We showed you images of entire planets being destroyed. We begged for help. The chamber grew quiet. You told us it was not the council's concern. You said the fringe dwellers were too primitive to matter, but humans cared. We sent ships. We saved millions of lives. We spent our own money and risked our own people. Valtharian's eyes narrowed. What is your point, human? My point is that we have been part of this council for 150 years. In that time, we have followed every rule. We have paid every fee. We have asked for nothing but the right to trade freely and help those in need. And what have we gotten in return? Drek gestured around the chamber. We get trials like this. We get treated like criminals for showing kindness. We get called inferior by species who have forgotten what it means to care about others. Some of the younger species began to murmur in agreement. The older species looked annoyed. Veltharion stood up to his full height of 12 feet. His purple skin darkened with anger. How dare you lecture us, human? Your species has existed for barely 1,000,000 years. We have maintained order in this galaxy for millennia. We're nothing but barely evolved primates who stumbled into space. Travel. The chamber fell silent. Jack felt something break inside him. Not just anger now, but something deeper. Disappointment, sadness, and finally clarity. You are right, Jack said quietly. We are young, we are emotional, we do care too much about others. And you know what? We are proud of that. He turned. To face the entire chamber, for 150 years, humans have tried to be good members of this council. We have tried to fit in. We have tried to be like you. But we cannot. We will not become cold and uncaring just to earn your approval. Veltharion laughed. Then perhaps your species needs further domestication. Perhaps we have been too lenient. With your emotional outbursts, that was the moment everything changed. Jack felt a calm come over him. The anger was gone, replaced by something else. Determination, Jack said. There will be no more domestication. There will be no more trials for showing kindness. There will be no more bowing to species who have forgotten what it means to be alive. He looked directly at Veltharion. The human government hereby withdraws from the Galactic Council, effective immediately. The chamber exploded in noise. Aliens shouted in dozens of languages. Some laughed. Others looked shocked. A few of the younger species looked hopeful. Veltharion raised his voice above the chaos. You cannot withdraw from the council. No species can survive outside our protection. You will come crawling back within a year, begging to be readmitted. Jack smiled for the first time in months. We'll see about that. He turned to Lisa, who was staring at him in amazement. Captain Grant, you are free to go. The human government does not recognize this court's authority. As Jack walked toward the exit, he spoke to the chamber one last time. We came here as explorers, hoping to find friends among the stars. We found something else instead. We found a galaxy ruled by fear and controlled by those who have forgotten how to dream. He paused at the door. We refuse to become like you. We refuse to let our children grow up in a galaxy where kindness is a crime and helping others is forbidden. We choose freedom. The door closed behind him, cutting off the chaos in the chamber. Jack walked down the corridor toward his ship, his footsteps echoing in the silence. Behind him, the greatest diplomatic crisis in galactic history had just begun. In his pocket, his communication device buzzed with an urgent message from Earth. President Amy Rodriguez wanted to know if the rumors were true. Had humanity really just declared independence from the galaxy itself? Jack smiled as he typed his response. It is true. We are free. And now the real work begins. President Amy Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the orbital platform New Plymouth, looking down at Earth through the massive viewing window. The planet looked peaceful from up here, but she knew that down below, 12 billion people were preparing. For the greatest journey in human history, 6 months had passed since. Admiral Morrison had walked out of the Galactic Council. 6 months of planning, building, and preparing for something that had never been attempted before. Humanity was going to leave the galaxy. Madam President, said Dr. Kevin Park, walking up beside her. Kevin was Earth's top scientist, and the man who had made their escape plan possible. The final tests on the quantum fold drive are complete. We are ready, Amy nodded. She had been president for 8 years, but nothing had prepared her for this moment. How many ships do we have now? 50,000 transport vessels, 10,000 cargo ships, 5,000 military escorts, and 2,000 construction ships, Kevin replied, plus the colony ships that are already picking up people from our outer worlds. Amy did the math in her head. It was staggering. Every human colony in the galaxy was being evacuated. 200 worlds, each with populations ranging from a few thousand to several million. And they were all coming home to join the exodus. The aliens still think we are bluffing, said General Nathan Cross, joining the conversation. Nathan was in charge of the military side of the evacuation. The Galactic Council issued a statement yesterday saying that humans will surrender within the month. Amy smiled grimly. Let them think that. It will make our departure more dramatic. The truth was that humanity had been preparing for this moment for decades without knowing it. Unlike other species in the galaxy, humans had never fully trusted the Galactic Council. They had always maintained their own technology, their own manufacturing, their own everything. Other species relied on Council-approved technology. They bought their ships, their computers, their weapons from Council-controlled companies. They had become dependent on the system. Humans were different. They had reverse-engineered every piece of alien technology they encountered. They had improved it, modified it, made it better. The fusion drives that powered human ships were actually more efficient than the antimatter drives used by most alien species. Human computers were faster than the organic neural networks that other species preferred. And then there was Kevin's greatest achievement, the quantum fold drive. "Show me the drive again," Amy said. Kevin led her to the center of the platform, where a massive machine hummed with barely contained energy. It looked like a giant ring made of metal and crystal, with strange symbols carved into its surface. "The Council species use wormhole technology to travel between stars," Kevin explained. "It is fast but limited. You can only go to places where there are established wormhole gates. But our quantum fold drive is different. It can take us anywhere. In the universe instantly, even to other galaxies," Amy asked. "Especially to other galaxies. In fact, it works better over longer distances. The quantum field becomes more stable when spanning greater space." Amy shook her head in amazement. While the Council species had been content with their ancient technology, humans had been innovating. They had been pushing boundaries, asking questions, trying new things. It was exactly the kind of behavior that the Council found so annoying. An alarm sounded throughout the platform. It was time for Amy's address to the galaxy. She walked to the communications center where cameras were, waiting to broadcast her message across known space. This would be humanity's official announcement of their departure. "People of Earth, citizens of human colonies, and beings of the galaxy," Amy began. "Today marks the beginning of a new chapter in human history. For 150 years, we have been members of the Galactic Council. We joined with hope and excitement, believing we would find friendship among the stars." She paused, thinking about all the disappointments, all the insults, all the times humans had been treated as second-class citizens. "Instead, we found a system that values age over wisdom, tradition over innovation, and control over freedom. We found a galaxy where helping others is considered a crime, and where entire species are dismissed as worthless simply because they are young." Across the galaxy, aliens were watching this broadcast. Some were laughing, others were worried. A few were beginning to realize that the humans might actually be serious. "The Galactic Council believes that we will surrender, that we will come, crawling back when we realize we cannot survive without their protection. They are wrong. Today, we begin our exodus from this galaxy. We are going to find a new home among the stars, a place where we can build the kind of civilization we believe in." Director Helen Baker, who was coordinating the civilian evacuation, handed Amy a data pad with the latest numbers. "At this moment," Amy continued, "evacuation fleets are departing from every human world in the galaxy. 12 billion people are leaving their homes to join us on this journey. We are taking with us our culture, our knowledge, our hopes, and our dreams. We are also taking genetic samples from Earth's animals and plants so that we can recreate our world wherever we go." The scale of the operation was beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. Captain Roy Mitchell, commanding the evacuation fleet, was coordinating the movement of millions of ships across hundreds of star systems. It was like conducting an orchestra with 1,000,000 musicians. On the world of New Texas, families were packing their belongings into transport ships. Children who had never seen Earth were saying goodbye to the only homes they had ever known. But they were not sad. They were excited. They were going on an adventure. On the mining world of Kepler Station, workers were dismantling entire factories and loading them onto cargo ships. The Council had expected humans to leave behind their industrial capacity. Instead, they were taking it with them. On the research station orbiting Alpha Centauri, scientists were carefully packing their laboratories. Dr. Sarah Kim, a xenobiologist, was taking samples of every alien species she had studied. "We might be leaving the galaxy," she told her assistant, "but we are taking our knowledge with us." The evacuation was not just about people and equipment, it was about preserving human civilization itself. Artists were taking their paintings and sculptures. Musicians were recording their songs. Writers were copying their books. Teachers were preparing lessons for children who would grow up in a new galaxy. And through it all, quantum fold drives hummed with power, waiting to carry humanity to their new home. Amy's broadcast continued. "Some of you may wonder where we are going. We have discovered a galaxy called Andromeda, rich with worlds that can support life. It is empty of intelligent species, which means we will not be intruding on anyone else's territory. We will build our new civilization there, based on the principles we hold dear: freedom, equality, and the right of all beings to pursue happiness." She looked directly into the camera. "To the species of this galaxy who have treated us with respect and kindness, you are welcome to join us. To those who have dismissed us as primitive, we leave you with this thought: you are about to discover what this galaxy loses. When humans are no longer here to solve your problems," the broadcast ended. Amy walked back to the viewing window and watched as the first wave of transport ships began to move away from Earth. Millions of ships carrying millions of people, all heading for the same destination, the staging area near Pluto where the quantum fold drive would take them to their new home. General Cross joined her at the window. "The Council fleets are moving to intercept us," he reported. "They want to stop the evacuation." Amy smiled. "Let them try. They are about to learn that humans are not as helpless as they thought." Down in the engine room, Kevin was making final preparations for the fold jump. In a few hours, the largest migration in galactic history would begin. Humanity was about to disappear from the Milky Way galaxy forever, and somewhere in the Andromeda galaxy, a new chapter in human history was about to begin. Factory Supervisor Kreltok stood in the middle of Production Line 7 on Mechanicus Prime, staring at the broken machinery that had been silent for 3 days. The massive industrial planet produced starship parts for half the galaxy, but now everything was falling apart. 3 years had passed since the humans left the galaxy, and Kreltok was beginning to understand what that really meant. "The heating system is down again," reported his assistant Glixmar. "The coolant pump stopped working yesterday, and the main assembly line keeps jamming." Kreltok scratched his four-armed body in frustration. "What did the repair team say?" "Said they do not know how to fix it. The maintenance manuals are all written by humans. Repair procedures were designed by humans. Even the replacement parts were manufactured to human specifications." Kreltok looked around the factory floor. Before the humans left, this place had been running perfectly. Production quotas were always met. Problems were solved quickly. The facility had employed over 2 million beings from dozens of different species. The humans had made up only 8% of the workforce. Kreltok had never thought they were important. They were just another species doing their jobs. But now he realized that those humans had been responsible for 60% of all problem-solving and innovation. When a machine broke down, it was usually a human who figured out how to fix it. When production needed to be improved, it was humans who came up with new ideas. When different species had trouble working together, it was humans who found ways to make them cooperate. Now the humans were gone, and everything was breaking. Sir Glixmar said nervously, "We received another message from the Galactic Council. They want to know why our production is down by 70%. Kreltok sighed. He had been sending the same report every week for months. Without humans, they simply could not maintain their previous output. The remaining workers followed their procedures exactly. But procedures could not account for every situation. When something unexpected happened, they did not know what to do. Across the galaxy, the same scene was playing out on thousands of worlds. Commander Zaravex of the Council's Enforcement Division read through the daily reports with growing alarm. The crystalline hegemony's mining operations had completely shut down. The crystal-based life forms could not work in the toxic environments where the best minerals were found. They had always relied on human engineers who could design protective equipment and solve environmental problems. The psionic dominion was having even worse problems. Their telepathic abilities were useless when dealing with human-designed technology. Human machines operated on principles that could not be read by mind-reading. They had to be understood through logic and engineering knowledge. But the worst reports were coming from the outer colonies. "Commander," her aide said, bringing her another stack of urgent messages, "the Zephyrian system is requesting emergency food supplies. The fringe worlds are reporting widespread equipment failures, and the Outer Rim colonies are, well, they are begging for help." Zara looked at the map of the galaxy on her wall. Red markers showed places where problems were getting worse. There were hundreds of them, and more appeared every day. The truth was becoming clear. Humans had not just been workers in the galactic economy. They had been the ones who kept everything running. They had gone to places other species would not go. They had solved problems other species could not solve. They had cared about beings that other species ignored. On the agricultural world of Harvest Moon, Rector Timlock was watching his food production collapse. The planet had been designed to feed 50 star systems, but the automated farming equipment was failing. "The irrigation systems need constant adjustment," his chief engineer reported. "The soil composition changes with the weather. The crop rotation schedules must be modified for each field." The human agricultural specialists used to handle all of this. Timlock looked out over the vast farmlands. Many of the fields were already turning brown. Crops were dying because no one knew how to adapt to changing conditions. What about the instruction manuals? "The manuals tell us what to do in normal situations, but farming is never normal. Every day brings new challenges." Humans seemed to understand this instinctively. They could look at a problem and just know what to do. The food shortage was affecting dozens of worlds. Species that had taken cheap, abundant food for granted were now facing starvation. Approved agricultural companies were charging enormous prices for what little food they could produce, but the crisis went beyond economics and technology. Dr. Sarah Kim, the human xenobiologist who had chosen to stay behind to study the aftermath, was documenting something even more disturbing. She was working on a research station in neutral space, observing the changes in galactic society. "The violence is getting worse," she noted in her daily report. "Without human peacekeeping forces, old conflicts are resuming. The Dominion has begun attacking weaker species again. The hegemony is strip-mining worlds without regard for the inhabitants." Sarah had spent years studying how different species interacted. She had always been fascinated by the complex web of relationships that held galactic civilization together. Now she was watching that web fall apart. "Humans served as mediators in hundreds of disputes," she continued. "They were often the only species willing to get involved when others were in trouble. They would send aid to disaster zones, negotiate between warring factions, and protect the weak from the strong." The Outer Rim was the worst affected. This region of space was home to younger species that the Council considered unimportant. Humans had established dozens of outposts there, providing medical care, education, and protection. Now those outposts were abandoned, and the region was descending into chaos. The fringe dwellers, who had been saved from genocide by human intervention 3 years earlier, were being attacked again. The psionic dominion had resumed their extermination campaign. There was no one to stop them. The Galactic Council was supposed to maintain peace, but their response was slow and bureaucratic. By the time they decided to act, entire populations had been wiped out. Young species throughout the galaxy were beginning to ask uncomfortable questions. If the Council was so powerful and wise, why was everything falling apart? If humans were so primitive and unimportant, why was their absence causing such problems? On the Council station, Counselor Prime Veltharion was facing the biggest crisis of his long career. Representatives from hundreds of species were demanding answers. Galaxy was experiencing its first major instability in over 1,000 years. The human departure was a minor inconvenience, Veltharion insisted during an emergency session. "These problems are temporary. We will adapt." but privately he was worried. Reports from across the galaxy painted a picture of systematic collapse. Industries that had run smoothly for centuries were failing. Trade routes that had been stable for millennia were becoming dangerous. Species that had lived in peace were now at war. The Council's ancient members had become so used to the status quo that they had forgotten how to handle change. They issued orders and expected them to be followed, but orders could not solve engineering problems, or stop famines, or end wars. They needed beings who could think creatively, adapt quickly, and care about outcomes rather than just procedures. They needed humans, but the humans were gone. And no one knew how to bring them back. Veltharion looked out at the stars and wondered, for the first time in his 3,000-year life, the Council had made a terrible mistake. In the depths of space, automated monitoring stations were detecting something that made the crisis even worse. The quantum signatures showed that the humans had not just left the galaxy. They had left this entire region of the universe. They were not coming back. President Carlos Martinez stood on the balcony of the Constitutional Hall on New Earth, looking out over the bustling city below. 5 years had passed since humanity arrived in the Andromeda Galaxy, and the transformation was remarkable. Cities stretched for hundreds of miles in every direction, filled with buildings that seemed to grow from the ground itself. Human architecture had evolved beyond anything possible in the Milky Way, combining beauty with function in ways that took his breath away. "The final delegates have arrived," announced Secretary Linda Thompson, walking up behind him. "We can begin the Constitutional Convention whenever you are ready." Carlos nodded. Today was historic. Representatives from over 400 worlds were gathering to create the charter for the Terran Federation. It's the first truly democratic galactic government in known history. But the Federation was not just human anymore. As Carlos walked into the Great Hall, he saw beings that would have amazed him 10 years ago. The Sylvani delegates looked like walking trees, their bark-like skin shimmering with natural patterns. The Rockborn representatives resembled living mountains, their silicon-based bodies sparkling with embedded crystals. These were the natives of Andromeda, species that humanity had encountered during their expansion across the galaxy. Unlike the rigid hierarchy of the Milky Way, the Andromeda species had welcomed cooperation and friendship. "President Martinez!" called out Elder Branch Whisper of the Sylvani. His voice sounded like wind through leaves. "Our people are excited to formalize our alliance. The biological technologies we have developed together have exceeded all expectations." Carlos smiled. The Sylvani were plant-based life forms with an incredible understanding of biology and genetics. Working with human scientists, they had created medical treatments that could cure diseases thought impossible to heal. They had developed farming techniques that could make any world fertile. "Speaker Stoneheart sends greetings from the Rockborn Collective," rumbled Granite Voice, the massive silicon-based delegate. "Our mining operations have uncovered resources beyond imagination. The human engineering knowledge combined with our geological expertise has created wonders." The Rockborn had taught humans about planetary engineering on a scale never before imagined. Together, they had learned to reshape entire worlds, moving mountains and creating new continents. They could terraform a planet in decades instead of centuries. Engineer Maya Patel, now the Federation's chief technology officer, approached the podium to give her report on their achievements. 5 years ago, we arrived in Andromeda with 50,000 ships and 12 billion people, Maya began. Today, we have 400 worlds with over 15 billion inhabitants. Our technology has advanced beyond anything we thought possible. She activated a holographic display showing the Federation's territory. Hundreds of star systems were connected by quantum fold routes, allowing instant travel between any 2 points. Our ships now use exotic matter drives that make our old fusion technology look primitive. We have mastered terraforming, genetic engineering, and quantum mechanics. We have built space habitats that can house millions of people in comfort and luxury. The audience listened in amazement as Maya described their accomplishments. Floating cities that rode the upper atmospheres of gas giants. Underwater colonies that turned ocean worlds into paradise. Space elevators that made planetary access as easy as taking an elevator. But the greatest achievement was not technological. Importantly, Maya continued, we have created the first galactic civilization based on voluntary cooperation rather than domination. Every species in the Federation joined because they wanted to, not because they were forced to. The Federation operated on principles that the Milky Way Council had never understood. Instead of ancient species ruling over younger ones, every member had an equal voice. Instead of rigid hierarchies, they had flexible partnerships. Instead of fearing change, they embraced innovation. Captain Steve Johnson, commander of the exploration. Vessel Pioneer's Dream stood up to give his report on first contacts. In the past year, we have encountered 17 new species, Steve said. 12 have requested to join the Federation. 3 prefer to remain independent but wish to establish trade relations. 2 are still considering their options. Steve paused, looking around the hall. But yesterday, we encountered something different. A refugee ship from the Milky Way. The hall fell silent. This was the first direct contact with their old galaxy. Since the Exodus, the ship carried survivors of the Villani species. Their homeworld was destroyed in a war between the psionic dominion and the crystalline hegemony. They traveled for 3 years to reach us, following rumors that humans had found sanctuary in Andromeda. Steve activated a recording. The image of a desperate alien appeared, its blue skin covered with scars. Please, the alien said in broken English. Our people are dying. The galaxy is at war. The council has fallen apart. Species are fighting each other for resources. We heard that humans built something better here. We beg for sanctuary. The recording ended. The hall remained quiet as everyone absorbed what they had heard. Dr. Kevin Park. Now the Federation's science director provided more details. Our long-range sensors have detected massive energy signatures from the Milky Way. There are signs of widespread warfare, environmental collapse, and population displacement. Conservative estimates suggest that over 50 species have gone extinct. Since our departure, the President Martinez felt a mix of emotions. Sadness for the suffering in their old galaxy, anger at the stubborn pride that had caused it, but also determination to do better. The question before us today, Carlos said, addressing the assembled delegates, is what kind of civilization we want to build. Do we close our borders and ignore the suffering in the Milky Way? Or do we extend our principles of cooperation and mutual aid to those in need? The debate that followed was passionate but respectful. Some argued that the Federation should focus on internal development. Others insisted that they had a moral obligation to help refugees from their old galaxy. Elder Branch Whisper spoke for many when he said, humans taught us that strength comes from diversity and cooperation. If we turn away those in need, we become no better than the council that rejected you. The Sylvani had a unique perspective on the situation. As plant-based life forms, they thought in terms of ecosystems and symbiosis. They understood that helping others ultimately strengthened everyone. Speaker Stoneheart agreed. The Rockborn have learned much from human compassion. We vote to offer sanctuary to all refugees, regardless of their origin. Young Captain Andy Chen, representing the human colonial worlds, stood up. My generation grew up in the Federation. We have never known the prejudice and hierarchy of the old galaxy. We believe that everyone deserves a chance to live free. The vote was unanimous. The Federation would offer sanctuary to any refugee from the Milky Way who requested it. They would provide food, shelter, medical care, and the opportunity to build new lives. But they would not stop there. I propose that we send humanitarian missions to the Milky Way, said Dr. Lisa Stone, the Federation's leading expert on interspecies relations. Not to conquer or control, but to offer aid to those who need it. The proposal was controversial. It would mean risking Federation ships and personnel to help the very species that had rejected humanity. But after hours of debate, it too passed. As the Constitutional Convention continued, Carlos reflected on how far they had come. 5 years ago, humans had been dismissed as primitive by the galactic community. Now, they were leading a civilization that spanned hundreds of worlds and multiple species. The Federation's constitution, when finally completed, would be unlike anything that had existed before. It guaranteed rights for all sentient beings regardless of species, age, or origin. It established democratic governance with representatives elected by the people they served. It enshrined the principles of voluntary cooperation, mutual aid, and respect for diversity. Most importantly, it declared that the Federation existed not to dominate others, but to help all beings reach their full potential. As the session ended, Carlos looked out at the stars of Andromeda and made a silent promise. The Federation would be everything the Galactic Council had failed to become. And someday, they would return to the Milky Way not as conquerors, but as friends offering a better way forward. President Laura Reed stood on the observation deck of the Federation flagship Humanity's Dream, watching as the official Galactic Council delegation approached. 10 years had passed since humanity left the Milky Way, and now the galaxy was coming. To them, the approaching ship looked ancient compared to Federation vessels. Its hull was scarred and patched, showing signs of hasty repairs. The Council's once mighty fleet was clearly struggling to maintain basic operations. The delegation. Leader is former Counselor Prime Veltharian, reported Admiral Mike Torres, the Federation's fleet commander. He is no longer in power. The Council has been fractured for 3 years now, Laura nodded. Intelligence reports from Milky Way refugees had painted a grim picture of their old galaxy. The rigid hierarchy that had ruled for thousands of years was collapsing under its own weight. What are his terms for this meeting? Laura asked. He is asking for humanitarian aid and technological assistance. In exchange, he offers limited trade agreements and promises of non-interference. Laura almost laughed. 10 years ago, Veltharian had called humans barely evolved primates. Now he was begging for their help. The meeting was scheduled to take place on New Geneva, the Federation's diplomatic capital.
Oh.
The world had been specifically designed for interspecies cooperation. With environments suitable for dozens of different life forms, as Laura walked through the halls of the diplomatic center, she passed representatives from across both galaxies. Sylvani delegates worked with human engineers on terraforming projects. Rockborn speakers shared geological data with Milky Way refugees. The contrast with the old Council's segregated chambers was striking. Director Paul Wright, the Federation's chief negotiator, briefed Laura on the situation as they headed to the meeting room. The Milky Way is experiencing its first galactic dark age in 4,000 years, Paul said. Over 200 species have gone extinct. Trade routes have collapsed. Entire sectors are cut off from the galactic community. What about the ancient powers? Laura asked. The psionic dominion has turned to enslaving weaker species through mind control. The crystalline hegemony is strip mining worlds to feed their failing economy. The Valkyrians are fighting a civil war between traditionalists and reformers. Paul showed her a holographic map of the Milky Way. Large areas were marked in red, indicating regions of active warfare or complete societal collapse. The younger species are suffering the most. Without human protection and aid, many are being wiped out by the older powers or simply dying from starvation and disease. The meeting room was designed to accommodate beings of all sizes and environmental needs. When Laura entered, she saw Veltharian sitting at the far end of the table. The once-proud Valkyrian leader looked aged and defeated. President Reed, Veltharian said, his voice lacking its former arrogance. Thank you for agreeing to meet with us. Laura took her seat across from him. Also present were Admiral Morrison, now elderly but still sharp, and representatives from several Federation member species. 10 years ago, you told Admiral Morrison that humans would come crawling back within a year, Laura said calmly. Instead, you have come to us. Why? Veltharian's purple skin darkened with shame. We were wrong. We believed that our ancient wisdom and established order were sufficient to maintain galactic civilization. We discovered that we had become too rigid, too focused on maintaining power instead of solving problems. He gestured to a holographic display showing the devastation in the Milky Way. Without human innovation, our technology stagnated. Without human mediation, old conflicts resumed. Without human compassion, we forgot how to care for the weak and vulnerable. And now you want our help, Laura said. We are prepared to offer significant concessions, Valtharian replied. Trade agreements, technology sharing, territorial concessions. Laura shook her head. We still do not understand. We are not interested in trade deals or territorial concessions. We are interested in fundamental change. She stood up and activated her own holographic display, showing the Federation's structure and principles. For 10 years, we have built a civilization based on voluntary cooperation, democratic governance, and respect for all sentient life. We have proven that these principles work. Over 400 worlds, dozens of species, billions of beings living in peace and prosperity. Valtharian looked confused. What do you want from us? Complete dissolution of the Galactic Council's hierarchical system, Laura said firmly. Guaranteed rights for all species regardless of age or development level. Democratic governance with representatives elected by the people they serve. And most importantly, those responsible for the genocides in the Outer Rim must face justice. The Valkyrian delegation exchanged worried glances. These terms would end their way of life forever. These demands are impossible, protested Sub-Counselor Crystal. The ancient powers will never agree to such changes. Admiral Morrison spoke for the first time. Then the ancient powers will continue to preside over a dying galaxy. The choice is yours. Laura continued. However, we are prepared to offer immediate humanitarian aid to any species that requests it. Food, medical supplies, technological assistance, and sanctuary for refugees. No strings attached. She looked directly at Valtharian. We are also prepared to help establish democratic governments for any species that chooses to adopt them. We will share our knowledge freely with those who embrace the principles of freedom and equality. The negotiations continued for days. Valtharian's delegation struggled to accept that the balance of power had shifted completely. They had once dismissed as inferior, now held all the advantages. During breaks in the formal negotiations, Laura met privately with refugees from various Milky Way species. Their stories reinforced her determination to demand real change. Young Zephyrian named Calamore told her about watching her homeworld die from starvation while council-approved food shipments were diverted to wealthier species. An elderly fringe dweller called Silent Wine described hiding in asteroid fields while psionic Dominion ships hunted his people for sport. A crystalline engineer named Shardsong explained how his species' leadership had become so obsessed with maintaining their position that they had forgotten their original purpose of protecting and nurturing younger species. The old system is dead, Shardsong said. It died when humans left. We are just waiting for someone to tell us what comes next. On the final day of negotiations, Laura presented the Federation's ultimate offer. We will return to the Milky Way, she announced. Not as conquerors, but as liberators. We will establish safe zones for endangered species. We will provide aid to any who need it. We will help build new governments based on democratic principles. She paused, letting her words sink in. But we will not restore the old order. The age of the ancient powers ruling over everyone else is finished. The future belongs to cooperation, not domination. Valtharian sat in silence for a long moment. Finally, he spoke. If we agree to these terms, what happens to us? What happens? To the Valkyrians, the crystalline hegemony, the psionic dominion? You become equal members of a new galactic community, Laura replied. Your knowledge and experience will be valued, but you will not be rulers. You will be partners. The signing ceremony took place on the anniversary of humanity's departure from the Milky Way. Representatives from over 1,000 species witnessed the birth of the new Galactic Federation. The document they signed established democratic governance, guaranteed rights for all sentient beings, and created institutions to prevent the kind of stagnation that had nearly destroyed galactic civilization. Admiral Morrison, now in his 80s, delivered the closing address. 10 years ago, we left, because we refused to accept injustice as the natural order. Today we return not as your subjects, but as your equals, offering the partnership we always sought. He looked out at the assembled representatives, seeing hope in faces that had known only despair. The galaxy is being reborn today. Let us make sure that this time we build something worthy of all the beings who call it home." As the ceremony ended, Laura watched ships from both galaxies working together to plan the greatest humanitarian mission in history. The return to the Milky Way would not be easy, but for the first time in 10 years, there was reason for hope. The age of democracy had begun.